March 14th, 2026. Well, as we continue our coverage of the war and kind of my commentary on it, I was looking back at my video from Tuesday, and I think it pretty much hit pretty much on target as we see where we are right now. We've moved to a new phase of the war, on one level, our bombardment of Iranian targets is going up. I hear that now we're basically in the briefing saying we pretty much destroyed most of the military industry and directly supporting industries Iran has, at least what's on the surface to be bombed. There's always a mystery how much they might have in tunnels. After all, it worked for the Germans to some degree during World War II. They haven't released mines yet into the Strait of Hormuz yet. And what's ironic enough, given the situation, Iran was able to pretty much continue to ship oil out of their port on Karg Island, and I mean shipments, I guess, primarily to China and other places that are taking their oil and are somehow working around or ignoring would-be sanctions we'd have. So that is ongoing, and I've heard they've made an offer that let other states bring their oil out as long as they get the U.S. Basically break relations with the U.S. and get the U.S. military bases out. And I don't think anybody's been a taker on that. We're looking at Iraq to see what they will do, given that they are a majority Shia country now, and in the post-war environment. Of course, they also have Kurds there, and we also have some American troops there. So that's an area that bears watching. There's been a lot of attacks on our bases, although the actual casualties apparently have been mostly injuries. Of course, some of them may be, traumatic brain type injuries like happened in some of the other bombardments. Some are more superficial things that just require bandages, I assume. And of course, we have 7 dead there. Now another 6 dead when an incident occurred with a KC-135 tanker and another airplane. I assume it was some kind of a collision in flight or something. I mean, I know that certain people that have podcasts are trying to claim it was shot down, but how could it be shot down over Western Iraq by the Iranians? I mean, come on. So I think it was a mid-air incident. These things have occurred historically. And so anyhow, apparently the other plane somehow was able to land. We don't know what kind of condition it was in, of course. So that's kind of the state of the combat here. Speaking of Karg Island, Trump has just announced sometime before this recording that we, in fact, have bombed all the military targets on Karg Island, which presumably leaves the island largely defenseless against a ground attack. And so that's something else to see what's involved there. By the way, if you like these videos, please give me a like, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, or you can also follow me on Rumble if you prefer that site. So, yeah, that's where we are. And now this, was it the Ticonderoga? I think, was that the name of it? One of these amphibious warfare ships with a Marine Expeditionary Group of 2,500 Marines and whatever, I guess, well, that may include some sailors too, I don't know, and aircraft and so forth, is heading from Japan area toward the theater of combat here in the Middle East. And what we plan on doing with that is a little bit up in the air. I'll kind of get into some possibilities, although and Karg Island is perhaps one of them, or perhaps we have other forces somewhere in the area we could use for that mission. And so, for the moment, we've got a kind of an interesting situation. That is that the Iranians are attacking ships, and they apparently have missiles that can do it, short-range missiles. They've got drones, and they've got sea drones, if you will. That's sort of like what the Ukrainians have been using against the Russians. And we'll see if we fare better than the Russians were against that. Because so far, the Russians really haven't solved the sea drone problem, if you're fought in the Ukraine war there, And so we'll have to just keep an eye on that one. One of the problems is, of course, we could easily do something to shut off the oil coming from Iran in order to economically penalize them and their supporters, like China. However, the problem is that would probably encourage them to drop the sea mines into the Strait of Hormuz, because after all, for the moment, as long as they can sell their oil, it's not their interest to do anything to interfere with it by just attacking other countries' tankers they effectively shut it down for practical purposes. We've seen the price of oil gone up. They maybe are fluctuate. They stabilize a little bit under $100 a barrel, depending on which type of oil it is. But you know, it's in the 90s to mid 90s to 100 in that range. So that's had a very adverse effect on our U.S. stock markets, and so that's not a good thing politically for us. Because after all, from my point of view, my interest domestically is keeping the Republican Party in power, and that means, because the Democrats, in my opinion, are the worst, and we can get into why they're a lot worse, but they're pretty bad what they want to do. And even if you totally disagree with this particular strategy in the Middle East, you have to realize that's not the world. Okay, this is one sidelight, but you have to look at socially and economically what they want to do to the country, flooding us with illegal immigrants and all kind of weird laws and transgender mutilation surgeries, all that sort of thing. So there's plenty of reason that I'm sticking with the administration. I don't vehemently disagree with what he's doing. I simply question, is it really worth the risk, considering we may lose the election in the fall over it, putting the Democrats in charge of both houses of Congress and maybe some more state governments, and we'll have a lot of bad things coming from our point of view domestically. And particularly if we can't really solve the problem. For instance, I still don't see the likelihood that will be a, quote, surrender by Iran due to air warfare. For the simple point that, first of all, who could really surrender? Right now, we have this new supreme leader, son of the previous Ayatollah, and we're putting out all kind of aspersions that it's gone from he was disfigured in the attack to he lost some legs in the attack to he's comatose. I don't know which. Putin was supposed to be dead 3 years ago, right? If something hadn't happened yet. So I think, how do we know what his condition is? If we don't know where to target him, do we actually have his medical report? So, but my point is, this guy has probably got to be a very angry person, considering his family's been wiped out, his father, relatives. He himself apparently has been injured to some degree, and they know he's a man marked for death. So I don't expect to see him being exactly a Mr. Congeniality here. And the other factor is that I think that when you're dealing with a radical regime like this, I make a comparison to, in a lot of ways, Nazi Germany reacted in the months before their final defeat. They never really sued for peace, and we really bombed the country into rubble. I mean, look at VE Day. Look at what was left, and that was because they actually had an organized military high command, which hadn't been taken out, which was there to sign the surrender document. But we've killed so many of our senior military leaders. Who's left to have the authority to say, quit shooting? I mean, somebody might say it, and somebody might just shoot him. That's the problem. I mean, I think that what will happen is that we'll continue to bomb. I guess next we'll just go against basic industries and the very rudiments of a modern society. But even then, they may not surrender. They'll simply be there. The people will still be hostage, and they'll be in worse condition than ever. And probably, what I'm beginning to conclude here is about why our strategy has run into a big snag is this. I've been thinking, well, look at the problem we're in. Okay, did the Pentagon and President Trump and his key advisors didn't see this themselves about the oil situation? I think no, they realized it. So what were they thinking? I think they were thinking that at this point that the damage of the regime would be so great that I think they thought a popular uprising would occur, and the regime would fall from power because of the losses of the key people, and because the people will just have a chance to rise up and overthrow the system, and that will lead to a situation where all these attacks on ships end, and we would be in a position, or at least down to a very low level, and we'd be in a position to consolidate a victory. But that doesn't seem to be happening at this point. It seems like it's the opposite effect. When the country's attacked like this, that the people are probably afraid, the typical person. And they're not they're afraid of us, they're afraid of their leadership, they're afraid of everything, maybe even their own shadow. And so the result is, I don't think they're in the mood or organized enough to overthrow the government. We'll see. If the government were to truly fall due to just massive attacks, my guess is you'd have something closer to anarchy than And that might end the attacks on the ships maybe, or get it down to a level which we can deal with. And the other aspect I'm looking at is this whole idea of escorting ships. I mean, look at what sea drones have done to the Russian Navy. Are we going to fare any better putting our destroyers and frigates into that environment? Are we not going to start actually taking real losses there? I mean, that includes a lot more personnel and the ships, and just the embarrassment of it. Because look what happened to the Russians. I mean, the Ukraine war has changed the whole dynamic of modern conflict. Things that were very powerful before are very vulnerable now. The best U.S. tanks, the best German tanks, and the best Russian tanks have become vulnerable to relatively lightweight, cheap drones. And so I think the same thing is maybe true about the idea of escorting here. I mean, in fact, if you really were going to send ships in there, now maybe a mixture of armed helicopters and maybe these A-10s might be the answer. Maybe a mixture of drones and A-10s could be the answer. I don't know. Some way to see these things coming and then just go in with the firepower of an A-10 and chew them up in the sea. I mean, I'm just throwing out wild ideas here. I don't know what they're planning on doing. The other thought is that they really are planning to seize, say, Karg Island. And however, okay, then what? I mean, some people think that, Daniel Davis thinks they just blow the place up. They might, but I think that'd be stupid. All they have to do is just shut off the oil flow, and we won't have it either, but they'll still have the ability to make a deal later. But I don't know. The others, the coastline along the Strait of Hormuz on the Iranian side, but the number of troops it would take to effectively seize and hold that, and what kind of casualties would be involved in that operation. I mean, as we talk about a helicopter assault, we talking about marine tracks going in there. I don't know. I mean, it looks like we could get drawn into a situation that would be pretty ugly. We could definitely bring in a lot of air power to support it, but that's going to be a different kind of conflict. And if you think the public is a little bit fickle right now, I'm a little worried about that one. On the other hand, that we're in a situation now where we really can't afford to walk away from. You can walk away from Afghanistan, but you walk away from this, and the world economy is being held hostage to the crazy Iranians. And furthermore, I still left it, how do we get rid of that enriched uranium that they got stored somewhere? It only takes probably one more cycle, or maybe two, I don't know, through the centrifuge to actually make bomb grade material. And now the possibility that the new leadership will reverse the fatwa and say, hey, it's a good thing to make a bomb. That's another problem we're looking at here. So anyway, that's kind of my assessment right now. We'll see if we can get the strait opened and get, ship oil flowing. I've heard that they're going to let Indian vessels get through, but they're not going to let anything that we want through. And so that leaves us in, that's why we may take Karg Island to stop them from selling their stuff. And then we'll see what happens. Well, anyway, that's kind of my rundown on the war right now. I mean, with no doubt they're taking a hell of a pounding on their side too. And I think their ability to fire at targets on our side is diminishing quite a bit. So anyhow, on another topic, I mentioned before that General McCaslin, as of this recording, has not been found either dead or alive. And so we have two piece of information did come out the other day. We'd always were told he didn't take his Apple Watch or his iPhone, but apparently he did take a .38 caliber revolver with him and his wallet. Which leads to the possibility that if he wasn't abducted by somebody, maybe he went into hiding because he's afraid of being attacked. And maybe he has some friends or supporters who potentially he rendezvoused with and left the area, and he's sort of in a, quote, safe house concept, maybe. Another possibility, just throw out ideas. But at any rate, so that's all for this time. I'll be posting this on YouTube and Rumble as always, and the addresses of my social media accounts are in the description below. All for now.